Kermit Zone with our very special guest star, you, the listener. Yay! It's time to fetch your headphones. It's time to check the mics. It's time to chat about culture on the Kermit Zone tonight. It's time now for a shake-up. It's time to go sit tight. It's time to start recording on the Kermit Zone tonight. Why do we always come here? I guess we'll never know. It's like a kind of torture to have to tape the show. So now let's get things started.
Why don't you get things started?
It's time to get things started on the most sensational, conversational, observational, confrontational. This is what we call the Kermit Zone. Welcome everybody to another Pop Culture Talk Zone. It's been a hot minute. We're coming in blazing in. I'm already blowing the mic out even though we already did an audio test. I'm Kermit the Grog, and here I am joined today on my left, your right or left, I don't know.
Hi, I'm
The person I'm gesturing to.
that would be me. Hello, I'm Forward Progress.
And to my right, maybe your left, unless you watch it mirrored, because you're that kind of a weirdo and we love you.
I am the backwards to forwards. Backwards? Progress.
Do you want to tell everyone your real name?
I'm
backwards
Nova Rose.
progress?
I'm backwards progress, also known as Nova Rose.
Fantastic.
You know, the last time we recorded one of these talk zones, we also started really loud as well.
That's how I do it, because I get into host mode and I'm just like, I gotta get energy, freaking woo!
Do it
My
live!
cheeks are already red, it's hot, the summer is coming. It's like winter is coming, but different. So today we're actually talking about a topic that I have, we've been talking about recording for a while and has been on my brain for like ever. So as is very clearly obvious if you listen to anything we've done, but if you haven't, we're really big into animation.
Yes.
And I myself even more so am a huge animation snob. I've gone through all of like Disney's works, a bunch of DreamWorks works, whatever, like a bunch of stuff. I have a lot of thoughts in my head about animation. And today, with the advent of the My Little Pony Generation 5 trailer finally coming out for the movie, we finally thought it was a good time to talk about a topic we want to talk about, which is animation styles and mediums and how that has changed over time and kind of how we feel about it and stuff we like and don't like about it. So I guess the big thing we'll start in Pony and kind of radiate out from there is that obviously, a lot of us were into Generation 4 My Little Pony, which was all 2D, I think mostly Flash animated.
Flash, yeah.
And at least the movie for Generation 5 is CG. Right now, we mostly only have some still images, but we've gotten a little, like, animatic little character animations. And I guess I'll take point is that, at least for me, it captures, while they look good in motion, it captures what I really feel about our like current state in film level animation is that almost everything is CG and all of it looks really cookie cutter. Maybe not cookie cutter is the right word because it's like a really nice cookie cutter, but it looks very samey. It's not like, you know, the styles are kind of becoming more and more you can't really see them between companies. Pixar looks like Disney, looks like DreamWorks, looks like everything they've been making for the past decade. And the movies might be great, and they are, but as someone who's maybe a little too obsessed with how things look and liking something that's fresh and new, I'm kind of tired of it and have been for a while.
I will say, like, I think this is definitely nothing new because
No.
I know the previous generation, like we saw just this huge influx of vectorized art, which is like your MLP and like. Just like all the shows started doing that type of art style.
Are you trying to invoke a years-old meme of Cal Arts and the bean face?
Yes.
Things that I don't subscribe to?
Yes.
Okay, then.
I mean, I totally understand because I know with that particular art style, it was like, it's cheap and it's quick to make. So I can definitely see why it would be adopted.
I mean, I guess it is. I feel like every generation kind of has a general look, and there's always going to be outliers, and I think that's this. But I think a lot of those shows of like what some of Steven was hand drawn, right?
It sounds right.
Like it's the style, but like when you really look at them, I feel like they do look pretty. Like all the ones that we've watched recently have a pretty different look. Because what, like we were just watching Tangled. And Tangled looks like a children's book come to life. I don't know what necromancy they're working to make it look as good as it does, because it looks incredible and it moves really well. And then we were just watching DuckTales, which looks completely different, but it also has a very cool, interesting style and color palette to it. And last year when we were watching Kipo, and Kipo's got like a really neat like look. Like all of these, I think, are unifying factors. These are all 2D animated, and I just there's something about that. I don't know if just people know how to do it better, that they all look distinct and different, and each one is kind of fresh in its own way.
I think it's like as time progresses, we have more accessible programs to go use, because I'm sure like like back in the day, like there was like Flash, I know was the big one, but like
you
now
drew on paper in front of a camera.
Now we have we have Toon Boom, we have Blender, like there's so many different kinds.
I think there's definitely a point to be made that 2D animation had years and years to evolve before we got to 3D. And the grand scheme of life of animation, true 3D, especially 3D computer animation, is still relatively new. Now, I'm sure we're going to get into other things like kind of like claymation and stop motion animation and such.
I didn't even think about that. I will say to new, we've had CG animation for about a minimum of 3 decades. Mm-hmm. And a strong point I want to make in this is not that CG is bad, because we have seen incredible stuff with CG stuff. Freaking I Will Live and Die by Spider-Verse, and I think I have almost every human I know that has seen that movie will freaking like, I will get in a fist fight over Spider-Verse because I'm a troubled human when it comes to animation. Like that movie was exactly what I was asking for somebody to do something different with the medium, and it's starting to spread out from there, and I appreciate it. But besides even just that, I'm seeing more and more on YouTube people showing up out of the woodwork, more and more people, I guess to Rose's point, that like these programs are becoming more easily accessible, and more people are coming in and putting their own spin and style on things. I know, if the name Worth the Kids means anything to you, he was the dude that made, I think the thing he's most well known for now is Big Top Burger, which is an incredible combination of 2D and 3D, and I feel like they mesh together well for like the production cycle he's doing. But it also gives it this really particular, special like look to it, and he's freaking worked some necromancy on other videos that he's made where it looks like 70s like Rankin Bass stop motion. And it's like, where is this level of creativity of visual elsewhere? I know you're great at rendering faces. I know they got the big old expressive eyeballs and they move around well and they're funny and they're charming, but it's just like, I need something fresh.
I think another thing to go be said is while we also have a lot of accessible programs now, there's a lot of ways that like to learn new programs that isn't just like going to like CalArts or Full Sail. Like there's websites like Skillshare or even YouTube where you can learn like entire programs, which is really cool. Like it's more accessible than ever to become an animator.
My hope would be, because it is more accessible, that will lead into new and more diverse styling, especially in the 3D worlds, because I think you and I are probably having that similar vibe on 3D, especially lately, is that it's not that I'm dissing 3D, but I just notice that I gravitate towards 2D, and in that, like, a great example is the little couple of minutes we got to see of this new 3D Rugrats, which at first when I saw it I was just like, oof, and I've been kind of like, what is it I've been trying to figure this out. What is it about 3D and such? Now, I think with a property like Rugrats, I think the thing, and this goes to what you were talking about earlier, is that it just, I feel like in 3D it loses the charm that the original animation style had. That it's not dissing on the people who are creating it. I'm sure they're doing all kinds of great stuff and whatnot. But for some reason, there's something about seeing the characters in that light. And I don't know how much of it is just because I grew up with Rugrats and I grew up with that style and it's just alien to me. Whereas if I was 5 or 8 now and getting into this new one, would I see it differently? Maybe. But
that's a good point to make.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing where I'm torn as to how much of this is when I was young, this is how it was, and how much and how much of it is I am like, how much of this is this style really is samey or really is off-putting.
Well, I know another thing that can be said is especially like when you're transferring from 2D to 3D, it's like if you had a style or a very particular style in 2D, it oftentimes doesn't translate to 3D like at all. I remember like I used to watch a lot of Jimmy Neutron and Fairly OddParents back in the day, and I remember they had a special years ago where I guess like it was
the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, of course.
Exactly.
They had 3 of them, I believe.
And then like where like Timmy goes into the Jimmy Neutron universe and like it doesn't work.
I think that was neat. I think that was a neat crossover. I think the problem is that we are used to seeing them like that. And Forward, you bring up that really good point of we're a bunch of people who grew up in the 90s and 80s to an extent. How much of this is shaped by nostalgia glasses? And I'm hoping it isn't, because it's like I want new stuff, and it's not just like, ooh, CG bad. Because like, again, there's great CG movies. All of them look great. The animators, the level of detail they've put into these films is impeccable. Like it is this. None of this speaks to their talent level.
Oh, certainly.
It's a point. At least where mine comes from is I don't want to say bravery because that's like calling them cowards, which they're not. But it's like try something new. I know how much you can add like more something I take from back when I used to watch like Pixar special features of like undersiding or sanding the underside of the drawers, something you're never going to see, but there's just something about that level of artistry put into things that people just kind of pick up on. There is something to that, but if it all is in that same kind of idea space, it's just not as impressive anymore.
I think another thing to be said is like, I mean, kind of going off of what I was saying, where with Rugrats, like there were so many like sharp and crisp lines, like very jagged, old art style.
It's Klasky Chupo. I never know how to say it. Everybody's got it. Every couple of months, I hear somebody else talking about it, and they've got a different take on it. They're like, no, it's this one. It's whichever one it's supposed to be. But it's the production company behind them that also did the first season of The Simpsons, and I think All Real Monsters and Wild Thornberrys. Like it has a really particular let's go out for frosty chocolate milkshakes.
Well,
look.
we also had there was also the Rugrats Wild Thornberrys crossover as well.
Correct, because it was all the same production studio, but that art style is kind of gross, but that was kind of part of its charm. I know some people don't like it, and some people do like it for that.
But then it's like you translate it though to 3D, and it's like right now, like the styling is very smooth.
I pulled it up on screen before. I'm going to do it again, and
like,
just looking at these stills makes me hurt.
It's like it's very soft, and it's like it didn't translate like at all.
And I guess that's the thing is, what was the intention? Was the intention to make it that way? And in which case, I guess they succeeded. So then that question becomes: is it just because it's different that it's so jarring to us? And again, this is not right or wrong answers, really. It's just kind of positing this theory.
Brain counterpoint. Detective Pikachu.
Gosh, Detective Pikachu. Wow.
Sonic to a lesser extent.
Though Detective...
You can translate from 2D to 3D. We've seen it done. You just need to have a particular... Like, you can't just go, put it in the 3D Maker Machine. Like, it takes a level of art design things, because it's going to have to come out kind of different, but you need to understand what made the original design special in 2 dimensions and then translate that. And that's hard, and maybe that doesn't necessarily, like, I hate when people say you can't do that and it's impossible. We've seen it done. Freaking Pokemon was like, how did you pull this? Like, and even just, and that's a different style altogether. It's possible. It just takes a different approach than it seems like what Hollywood is doing currently.
One of the things with Detective Pikachu especially, and maybe this is kind of one of those take note, and I think Pony also did this, where they, with Detective Pikachu, they got a guy from the community who was known for drawing interpretations of Pokemon, realistic Pokemon, like what they would look like in the real world. And they took somebody who had, done this and had a love for the genre, or the franchise, I should say, to bring him on to consult on the design. So it's like they took somebody who knew how to do it and made sure that it was in line, and not just somebody who knew how to do something, period. Somebody who also had a love for the product.
Yeah, who would know if it was done right or not.
Because that was the thing about Detective Pikachu that made it so great, was it felt like, in some ways, like a love letter to all of us who have loved Pokemon for years. Because it's like, the way that the Pokemon, it was like the way they looked seemed right, the way they acted seemed right, the things they did, everything about them seemed like they went and even looked at the Pokédex entries for these various creatures.
It made everything
made sense. Yeah.
Everything, I feel the key phrase is felt right.
Yes.
Did they look exactly like they did in 2 dimensions? No, that wasn't it about. It's about capturing that feeling.
And I think that's. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna Rosie to say you finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, my to finish my point with G5 Pony, it's interesting because they got Malu, and I still don't know if I'm saying that right, but helped design some of the new characters, and that's an interesting thing where you bring in a fandom artist who obviously part of the community, loves the series, helps to design these new characters, but has to figure out a way to translate a new sense of Pony into G5, which has got to be daunting to take something that's always been 2D and all of us, with the exception of kind of that the hybrid we got in the movie and such.
Yeah, it's kind of a middle step.
But to take what's been established for so long and to make something brand new and radical, and that's got to be daunting as hell.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You were ready to say something for it, and then Ford took the mic, and then I think we moved forward, and I was just like, I want to make sure you get your point up, but no, we're here. Cut it all out. Transition. I think that's a good point. Leading question, so mostly, though I can say my opinion just because I'm going to be boldface about it. Do you have this feeling about everything's kind of samey, and that you won't necessarily give something the time of day because it looks kind of similar to other things, or even the flip of that, of something that kind of is really outside of the bounds will grab your eye more than something that's like even kind of middlingly different?
Yes. Definitely something that looks unique is going to grab at me. And, it's a really good example of that is especially some artists who have kind of a distinct style, but then you have variations within it. And the name that comes to mind is Gendy Tartakovsky.
Yeah. He's got a look.
He's got one heck of a look. It carries throughout all of his series, but at the same token, they're each distinct, too. Primal is distinct from Samurai Jack, is distinct from his work on the Clone Wars, is distinct from Dexter's Laboratory.
But they're all very clearly Gendy. Rose, do you have a similar agree or disagree? Because I know, I especially when I ask you, between Ford and I, we've got the hipstar brain. And we generally are subconsciously drawn away from popular things because we're a bunch of dum-dums.
For me, it's does this hurt my eyes? If the answer is no, I'm gonna watch it.
Okay.
For me, I'm like, as someone that wanted to go get into animation, like, don't get me wrong, like, I love animation and I love picking it apart, but at the same token, like, I think the most important part for me is its story. Like, it can have absolutely beautiful graphics and everything. We watched the movie the other day that was like, it was really crazy and like different.
We watched Hells, by the way, the English dub of that done by the Team 4-Star people. Recently hit Crunchyroll, so we checked that out.
But it's like it's so pretty. It's so different. It's such a different style, and I loved every like second of just watching it work. But the story was like all over the freaking place, and it was really hard to follow at times.
But it was an experience. Would you say it would have been a weaker? It would have. Okay, I guess let's start with this. Would you say it was worth watching?
Yeah. I mean, I don't regret watching
Okay,
it.
that's what I say. So, and I know it's hard to imagine this because you'd have to imagine a different reality that didn't happen. But it's like if it did not have the art style and it had a lot more anime generic one, do you think it would have been as compelling?
Probably not. I don't think.
Like that's I guess kind of where the camp that I'm coming from is. So I have like I mean obviously we've seen a burning vigor about these things, but specifically to kind of stick in the same ballpark but kind of swap from specifically CG of like I have a burning vigor of a general dislike against samey looking anime. If I see freaking Protag Kun show up, or like, here's the cute girl, here's the sailor uniform, same exact lines, same exact colors, like nothing going different. Like everything looks the same of everything else. I'm not going to give it the time of day. And that's how I operate. And something that can kind of go out of the bounds a little bit. And it doesn't have to be like drastic. It doesn't need to be huge. But I give a lot of credit to like subtly different design. Where it's not just, here's the same body shape, here's the same uniform, here's the same hair, here's the same face. Just
like I know, kind of like going off of anime, just doing a little bit of gushing. Freaking Violet Evergarden, like that one always sticks in my brain because it's like, first of all, it's so gorgeous.
It really is.
It is probably the most gorgeous anime I think I've ever watched. Also, like as far as character design goes, there is one character, just some, just one of the guys, and he wears high heels. And they poke fun at it, I think, once, but for the most part, he's just wearing high heels. No reason for it, just because he likes them.
The anime conversation is interesting to me because, and especially now, I've always said that, I shouldn't say always said, but I've thought about this recently when thinking about this 2D versus 3D debate here of anime in 3D.
Gosh, I didn't even think about
CGI.
that. But that's a really good point to make.
It just it breaks my brain to even think about. But well,
Beastars, baby. Beastars looks incredible. Didn't we watch something else that was anime and CG recently?
This is Studio Ghibli.
Ooh.
Do I even have to go there?
For people either not watching so they can't see our faces or people not aware of this situation, Studio Ghibli recently put out a CG film on HBO Max. And I don't think I've personally watched it, but I've seen the trailers, and it looks like a CG movie from the 90s, except worse. They have not learned any lessons despite working on 2 video games in CG that look a lot better and move a lot better than this. And I don't know what's going on.
You bring up video games.
But you know what's weird? Okay, so good. We're going to get to video games in a second. You know what's weird is, though, because I know Japan knows better on CG animated features because the Lupin the Third movie came out, and I haven't seen it, but I've been dying to. But the trailer looks like they captured the energy and the spirit of it, and it looks great. Even if it is a little bit more pared down to like what America, the West is doing right now, because Japan was a little slow in the uptake of CG, and some of their CG anime still looks like garbage. But also, again, sometimes you get a Beastars, or another thing I continue to try to remember and I'm failing at, where they look incredible, and it's just like I don't know how else I would watch this besides this. But that's definitely something to think about. There is again an example of somebody taking CG and kind of doing something different with it, and it gets a good look. Video games, cool, yes.
Going on video games, Hollow Knight is just like the art style of that is so like particular and pretty. Like I know we were watching what was it, the Drawfee, which is an art channel where like they were drawing, what was it, Dark Souls bosses in the Hollow Knight universe. And I remember, like, one of them was trying to go capture the background. He's just like, I can't. Like, the background is so, like, particular and, like, super detailed. while also being so simplistic. And it's like, that is so cool that, you know, it's so pretty.
That's a good point. I feel like, yeah, video games actually have been animation-wise, both in 2D and 3D, have had like a wealth of variety and different takes on things, and not always just kind of realistic and not the same kind of 16-bit thing. Hollow Knight's a good example. All the stuff in the freaking Metroidvania thing that we've gotten from indie games of that. Blasphemous, I know, has a really neat kind of way old school 16-bit thing that's like a take on like Spain Roman Catholic iconography, and that's got a really particular look. I know Ori and the Blind Forest is really like an incredibly visually looking game that I'm hopefully finally going to get around to. And just all the different things. I wonder why that is that video games are a lot more... I guess because they've been in 3D a lot longer than movies have?
Possibly. It's interesting because I think about the growing pains years that we had for 3D, and I can think of no genre that better captures, in my eyes, the growing pains of the 3D era than Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
You had the first 3 games, at least first 3 mainline. We're not going to get into...
We don't got to go into the depth.
Yeah. And then you had
which were digitized actors, so it was like...
Yeah, it was all
2D.
mocap and everything.
Well, no, it was not mocap. That's different. Mocap would be CG, or would be 3D then.
They did have motion capture, though.
What?
Yeah. They even created a character called Mocap who wore a mocap suit.
Okay, I thought that was when they started doing 3D then.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it's still motion capture. They're capturing the motions, but it's like...
But it's
literally...
It's not the same way you think of mocap nowadays.
Yeah, correct. It's not like feeding into a digital thing. It's like literally them moving and then I guess drawn over.
But there was definitely an odd sense, especially about creating 3D arenas and 3D characters, and a lot of growing pains within it. And what's interesting nowadays is there is this great blend of 2D with 3D now in Mortal Kombat that is just like the right blend.
What's the 2D? Like, what do you mean by that?
Like, it's not 3D arenas anymore.
Oh, it's 2.5D. It's 2D
exactly.
playing 3D character models.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
Where there's ways that they have figured out, but it took a lot of years of growing pains. And that's one of those things where I wonder, looking at certain things in animation, where I go, are certain like studios, certain points, certain whatever, still going through these growing pains where they can't get these other styles, and I don't know.
I really like the amount of talent that is at like Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks, and the things they can pull off in the styles they're doing. Like again, none of this issue comes down to animator like talent or creativity. It's just, I don't know if it's just like, this isn't marketable or whatever.
It's not a talent issue.
No,
necessarily.
it is 0% talent. I'm putting blame pretty much on money people.
I mean, there definitely could be that, because there is that trend of playing it safe.
Yep. Yeah. And especially when you're trying to advertise to kids and families.
Well, that's something that could be said, is like, I'm wondering if that's why the Rugrats reboot is kind of going the route that it's going, is because the old style was like, could be seen as gross.
I feel like we get into our reboots conversation of just like, that's kind of what it was and part of what made it charming, and if you remove that, it's not really it anymore, and it's like, well, why would you go back? You're alienating the people who want to come back to it.
Well, if it's money.
And why would anybody, like, unless it's really good, why would anybody do it now? Why not make something new then? If you're going to resurrect a corpse, keep the soul at least.
Because it's like, I mean, if it's money people, then
then it's money. Exactly.
Money
that's the thing. Because they just
so,
go, this is a thing people know. I mean, we're talking about it because it's something we grew up with.
So they're probably like, oh, CG, that should be safer because, it's not
That's what it is now, yeah.
Yeah.
Freaking big studios aren't making claws.
It's interesting. Like, some of the things I remember from when we were younger that would start to play in different fields were, they looked cool because they were playing in the 3D realm in a different way. What series I'm remembering that was just like, it was weird, but it was interesting because it looked weird, was Reboot. Do you remember Reboot?
I never watched it, but I've seen clips. I know what you're talking about. Like, that's really early, like, TV CG, which is, like, even more impressive than movie CG because there's, like, you have, like, no time. And it's not like when you're drawing where you can just draw and be done with a drawing. Like, you gotta make the thing, and then you gotta render it. And it's like, we're talking about, like, 90s computers doing this. It's nuts.
Like, freaking... Like, I know Jimmy Neutron was one of my favorite shows growing up.
Man, if you try to go back and watch that movie... it does not age well visually. The show, like... There's a point where it starts getting better, but, like, early on when you go back, it's just like, CG has gotten better, and this is, like... The jokes are good. The movie isn't as good. The movie feels completely different from the show. Little Jimmy Neutron tangent. But the show is still funny, but I don't know how well it's visually aged. I feel like that's a problem with CG is that it doesn't age except in really particular cases, it doesn't age as well. Toy Story ages great because it's toys. You know what doesn't age great in Toy Stories? The humans. They will always be the sticking point. Anything living will always be a sticking point in making CG age badly. And the same goes for video games to an extent. A lot of that, like, PS1, Dreamcast, and 64 era, unless it's stylized really specifically, has aged really poorly. And even to an extent later ones. That's why, and I feel like as we get further and further, like, Jeremy, or Ford, I'm going to call on you for this, actually, because I don't have too much of a horse in this race, and I guess Rose do to an extent, but I know, whatever. Has Twilight Princess aged well? Visually?
I think so.
I mean... See,
I guess does it show its age?
Nah.
There's something interesting about it about the Zelda games. One of the because each Zelda game has its own unique style.
Correct.
And there's been a lot of taking it and making it crisper and sharper because we got Twilight Princess HD. Now that being said, I'd be interested to go back and play the GameCube version because I have it and just see what it looks like now.
Because my train of thought is with this whole like things aging well. Is you know what freaking ages like a fine wine? Wind Waker, my baby, mwah, gorgeous. Cell shading doesn't age. It looks as good as it did back then. HD only made it better, but it wasn't like this looks bad. It's like it went for a style. And it won't age because of that. You know,
that's one of the things that I'm hearing debate about with people, because people are basically complaining, because
it's the internet.
This is the world, and about Skyward Sword HD and being like, you know, does it really look that much better? And it's like, well, the style they went with in the original, like, there's only so much you need to do to bring it forward.
Yeah.
And
the Wii really showed that Nintendo needed to be on an HD console because it's like stuff like that and why did I say Gravity Falls? Mario Galaxy, everybody. Looks great, but if you play them on the Wii, there's this like smattering of Vaseline over the screen and you're like, is that Mario? Is that Mario in there? And they look great, but they're just like being held back. But that's a little less age and more just like technology, which I guess does play into it as well. But I'm a big proponent of that sort of cel shaded, like if you're going for a particular design style, like speaking of Dreamcast, like Jet Set Radio ages like a fine wine because it has this different, really specific look it's going for. A lot of the things that are more realistic from that era age very poorly. I'm trying to think of something else from the Dreamcast that's like a little bit more like realistic looking, like a Quake or something. I don't know. I feel like I want a better example than that. Any sports game from any year, unless it was cartoony-ish, has aged like a fine milk. And admittedly, those were made to be a little bit more disposable, but it's like, and that's not their fault. It's supposed to be realistic looking, but that's just where my brain went. But I feel like that kind of look makes you a little bit more evergreen than something else. And I feel like 2D, once it reached out of like 8-bit pixels, doesn't have that as bad.
Also, I'm just going to go in a little bit of nostalgia talking about sports games. Did either of you play the Space Jam game?
What?
No.
What are you talking about?
There was a Space Jam game.
On like the website or on like a console?
On the console.
I've never heard of this.
It exists.
Are you sure you're not talking about Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden? I have things to talk to you about later.
Okay.
Space Jam is canon in that game. Like the events of Space Jam are canon in that video game.
I mean, it might have been. I just know it was a basketball game with the Space Jam characters. So
I need to do research after this.
I played that back in the day. It was
Nice. Something I will say that actually combines a little bit of forward talking about fighting games and that whole, cell shading and CG and the absolute madness of CG and 2D coming together is what Arc System Works has been up to with the Guilty Gear series and to a similar extent the Dragon Ball Z Fighters or whatever that actually is called.
Dragon Ball Fighter Z.
Yes, thank you. Fighters. I remember reading an article that the developers were really annoyed that the Americans were calling it that.
I don't have it, so.
Because in Japan, Dragon Ball Z isn't Dragon Ball Z, it's just Dragon Ball. It just kept going, but they renamed it in America because it was like, well, it's different now, so it's marketing. Which I don't think is a bad thing, but whatever. But if you have not seen those before, Google up Guilty Gear. I mean, Strive is the new one. It's not out yet, but there's probably a bunch of footage around in like glorious 4K. Go onto YouTube, Guilty Gear Strive, or like Guilty Gear Xrd, which is the letter X and RD, Revelator, which was how I used that idea as my naming process for a lot of events we had back in the day, because it made me laugh. But they are 3D models that are animated to look like 2D, so they're like messing with the frame rate, and all of the angling is really specific. So it's all of the stuff that people love about 2D, like sprites in a fighting game, but with like the fidelity of 3D character models that then you can like change colors really easily, and I guess costumes. I don't know if Guilty Gear had different costumes, but it's this crazy necromancy I hope we see in more things, where it looks, I still remember the first time I saw a trailer for Guilty Gear Xrd, and it's like, oh, it's 2D, and then like the camera like shifts, so you're like seeing the back of somebody's shoulder for a split second, and you're like my brain broke because it didn't understand what it was looking at.
Well, I mean, kind of hopping on that. One thing that boggles my brain is the programs that do VTuber rigs is really fascinating because, like, I guess the way it does it is instead of rendering a full 3D object, in order to preserve the anime look, it's actually like a bunch of different shapes kind of like layered on top of each other. So if you actually look at it from the side, it looks like this like monstrosity.
It's something that is very specifically meant to only be looked at from one angle.
Exactly.
I mean, that's actually similar to the Guilty Gear style. It's like when you're trying to ape a 2D style in 3D, things don't work from other angles usually. They're made to be like, that's why it works in something like a fighting game and not as much as like an adventure game when you're hopping around where you can move a camera. Fighting game, you don't control the camera. There's no camera buttons. The game does it when it wants to, and it will only do that at times where it deems it's okay to look at the character models in those ways.
Because I know there's a couple of VTubers that have VR chat models, like 3D models for VR, but it's like if you put the rig with the 3D model, like there's just something like different in that 3D model. Like even though it's like almost exactly the same, like it's missing a piece.
That's my favorite kind of stuff. That's what I want more in animation. That kind of weird, like it just works sort of, magic involved where something different going on. Question, or do you have a point? I apologize. I don't want to steamroll.
I mean, I have a transition, but I'm kind of curious what your question is.
So we talked about we grew up in, pretty much the Disney Renaissance back in the 90s and whatnot. And we're just like, okay, now we're in the middle of history where there's a lot of like kind of samey looking CG movies. Again, looks great, but it's just like, give me a little bit more. Do you think we had something like that back in the day with certain 2D films? And just now looking back, now that a bunch of the extra schlock has kind of acid burned away, that we just go, oh, gems, all this looked different. We get to be really cherry picky about it because we're getting to look at like an entire decade or more and just pick out the moments instead of like living in it moment by moment where it's just like, well, this one and then this one and then this one that all seem kind of samey.
I feel like with American animation, like we had so many different styles to choose from. Because it's like you have like the guy that made Fairly Odd Parents. You had Craig McCracken. What other ones were there? The guy that made
Danny Antonelli or whatever the heck his name is that made Ed and Eddie.
Yeah, there was like you had like all of these like styles that just like totally different from each other, and like you can go tell like who made these particular animations just because of that style. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because like my pool is kind of small, but I know I have a hard time watching 90s anime because like they all have this very particular style that was janky to me. Like I know a lot of people praise like things like Ghost in the Shell, but I'm like, I tried watching it and I'm just like, the style is just doesn't work with me. I don't know why. A lot of 90s anime had a very particular style.
I would agree with that. I feel like any particular era has a look. Like even if you describe, which is true, that there was so many different creators back in the 90s, early 2000s, you can still look back, and even if it doesn't hit all of them, that there is sort of like a cohesive like style idea across a lot of them. And you know what the word I would use to describe the 90s animation style?
Oh gosh.
Gross. Not that they looked gross, but gross things happened and people looked gross on purpose. The 90s were gross. Make bugs to gross your sister out. TV ad. Buy my toys. Sorry.
Invader Zim, I think, is a perfect example of that.
Invader Zim is that cynically done at the end of the decade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you know what comes to mind instantly when you talk about that is something like Ren and Stimpy.
Yes, Ren and Stimpy is the poster child of that. I've just got hit with a revelation. So actually, with Ren and Stimpy, so let's rewind back to the 80s.
Okay.
Forward, can you rewind back to the 80s for me? I can't.
Okay.
Everything looks kind of similar because they're trying to sell toys. You've got your He-Mans, you've got your G.I. Joes,
Yes.
You've got your My Little Ponies. You've got a lot of different shows that, looking back, are kind of samey. And then, lo, from the heavens, the Disney afternoon comes down and goes, hey, let's put money into TV production and not just try to sell toys and, like, make prestige television for children.
Mm-hmm. Merchandising.
Exactly. I mean, that was involved in it, too, but, like, that was, like... And that changed it up, but it was in that moment... There was all these samey 2D animated things that were very similar style because they were trying to make things as cheaply as possible. And then here came Prestige. And then along with that a little bit later, you get Ren and Stimpy showing up, which was the same thing of whatever that jerk's name is who made Ren and Stimpy initially was just like, everything looks samey. I want things to look like Looney Tunes, which isn't a bad idea. He just sucked as a human being. And that's kind of where Ren and Stimpy came from, is he was just like, everything looks kind of samey. People aren't putting money in. People are playing it too safe. Let's go back to the golden age of animation, to older Disney, and like I said, specifically like Looney Tunes and like your Fleischer films, and that's what Ren and Stimpy is partially born of. Is just sort of this thumbing the nose at the establishment at the time being too samey, and that was a paradigm shift.
Well, you know what was interesting, because is what Nickelodeon ended up doing then in the 90s, because there is a look to Nicktoons in the 90s that is
specific.
Yeah, it is different from what you got on like Fox Saturday morning cartoons or something
Disney's
like that.
Afternoon, yeah.
Or Disney's Afternoon. There was a look when you saw Angry Beavers and Rocko's Modern Life and such. Like they each had their own thing, but there was a style that just kind of was woven through that kind of just Nickelodeon look at the time, I would say.
Well, it was interesting because I know like my mom didn't really allow me to watch Cartoon Network when I was a kid, because I know a lot of Cartoon Network shows were odd.
A lot of Cartoon Network shows, I think Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab jump out at me the most, are based on like an older animation company from the 50s. I think they're called UPA. I could be wrong. It's the people who made Gerald McBoing Boing. Craig McCracken and, you said his name earlier, the guy who did Samurai Jack, who's...
Gendy
Tarkovsky, both have very clear, like, if you watch, like, the Gerald McBoing Boing stuff and watch old Dexter, you'll just like, oh, of course. Because it's what people grew up with, then they kind of form into their own style then when they start creating. It's not one-to-one, but you can kind of see a lineage to it. I had another thought and I lost it, and I'm really upset with myself.
Like, yeah, like, although, oh my gosh, like, getting my mom to let me watch freaking Invader Zim,
That's got to be interesting.
Oh.
I remembered it. So we were talking about it, like, you and Nickelodeon, we were saying that it had a particular style to it, but also, like, that, like, a DuckTales or a Ren and Stimpy were, like, they were the big things, you know, maybe in hindsight that we look back on, because history is kind of weird compared to when you are in the moment. But they were, like, big disruptors that kind of changed up the animation game, and a lot of things followed to it because it became so popular. Mm-hmm. I'm not seeing it play out yet. Do you think Spider-Verse is that, or could be that, or is it too late?
Spider-Verse, I feel like it definitely, I think, has influence that it is inspiring. I don't know 100% what you do, because part of the thing with Spider-Verse is the look of Spider-Verse going with that comic book theme, where I could see where people are going to look at it and be like, that's so cool, but it doesn't fit what we want to do.
True. Yeah, I guess so.
It's and there's so many different factors, because, you know, and it's one of the things that I was thinking about a little bit earlier, especially since what you were talking about is we see a lot, we're noticing a lot of this samey animation style from big studios. So is it just that thing right now where we are going to expect that from the big studios and are looking to the more independent productions to give us that inspiration at this point?
That's a good point. I guess it's like I want that to bubble up to the top, that these incredible, like, top in the world, like top in class world whatever artists, travel trained artists, can, like, fully show their full talent in a way that, like, things can look different, that you can get a Spider-Verse shakeup. Because, like, if I saw that as a kid, like, my world, I mean, I'm an adult, and I saw it and my world was changed, and I said, this is visually what I am looking for. That is something that is just such a departure, that is such a, like, I keep going back to Brave, which seems like such a dumb way to put it, but, like, it's just such a different, interesting, like, just creatively lush instead of kind of creatively, I don't want to say bankrupt fully, because, like, again, I don't want to, like, completely badmouth the current stuff, but it's like, there's nothing like, wow, what's this? I guess going back a bunch to when we were talking about, when Rose was talking about when we watched Hells, is it the strongest movie? No. Is it visually distinct in a way that kind of sticks with you after you've seen it? Yes. That same studio did Redline. If you have not seen Redline, it freaking rules, and it has a really distinct visual style to it, and I think that's part of what makes it great. You seem like you had a point. I wanted to stop. I didn't have another thought.
It's okay. Really. It's okay. There's so many, like, little things you can do even in animation that make such a big difference. And this is film in general. But I remember in the 90s, we had 2 concurrently running Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons.
Yes, we did.
There was what we affectionately refer to as Sat AM Sonic, and then there was The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Both had Jaleel White as the voice of Sonic, might I add, which Jaleel White did a fantastic Sonic the Hedgehog, and I would love to see him play the role again, but I digress. I'm thinking against Ben Schwartz. He's really good at it, too.
It's pretty great. He's doing a good job.
He's doing it up. That's an in-joke. So, but the look and the feel of each of those 2 cartoons was vastly different, even though it was set in that same kind of Sonic the Hedgehog verse. But they did have different characters. Sonic and Tails were in both, and Robotnik obviously was the villain in both. But there was the colors were different. Just the tone was different, and little things they did with the character, and it's like, just all you have to do is look at them side by side, and just you could look at one frame from each side by side,
and you instantly knew which one they belonged to.
Like, you knew that this one was more kind of like the kiddie version, and this one was more like your, you know, young adult version. And that, I watched them both because, I mean, I grew up playing a lot of Sonic, but it was always interesting to me, and I guess that's that thing about sometimes it doesn't take a big revolution to make something stand out. Sometimes it can be even simple changes to the style to start making a push towards something.
That's a good point. And that push can happen at any point by anyone. I'm going to build off of something Rose said earlier, that more of that technology and people being able to learn how to use that technology is like that barrier to entry is lowering more and more like every day. And things that weren't possible before by a single person or a small group of people is becoming more and more of a possible thing. I'm gonna give my little, or Rose, you take it. I don't want to take it from you. I'll get to my thing then.
Okay, because I know another thing that could be said is looking at Visipop with Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel.
I know you think the main thing now is so left behind. You forget about it. I know it hasn't been left behind. It got picked up.
Like it's interesting with that because it's like, you know, like they have like a bunch of people working on that, but like there isn't like a studio that they all work. They just like the internet has basically made it so like each person can go work on it, like, you know, all across the country. So it's like you don't even have to be in the same place anymore, which also makes things interesting.
Well, and that's part of the thing of how we're getting our shows during the pandemic. To face facts here, that's animation's one of the things that is able to continue because you can social distance and work on it.
It's something that a bunch of people work on. I think that's why we can look in the indie spaces. Like Has Been Hotel is actually a really good example. That has such a distinct look because it's just people coming together. It's not a studio. Money's being put into it now, and we'll see how it goes because, you know, money or not and passion or not, when something has a deadline, sometimes designs have to get a little simpler, and I don't think that's a denying of artistic creativity. It's just sometimes you can't constantly draw a character that has 12 arms really detailed. I don't know if it'll happen yet. We haven't seen any footage since they got picked up, but I wish them the best. But I feel like that's a really good point, is maybe there is enough other people making animation that we shouldn't be looking towards Hollywood for these things, because that's where it used to be. That was the only place you could find it, is from big studios. And like, getting back to the point, that bear is being less and less. And like, I learned recently that there is a new technology that can help you rotoscope things via a freaking AI system, and it's the easiest thing to do. It is literally that, and I learned this from somebody on YouTube who's already been doing it for sketches. I wish I could remember the name of it. Kicking myself for this. But it's basically just a system that you break your video down to frame by frame, which pretty much any video editor can do that's worth its salt, or free like I do. You pick a keyframe or multiple keyframes, you draw over how you want it to look, and then you go, here are the frames of the video, here's my keyframe which lines up to this particular frame of the video, interpolate out what's going on. And you can essentially rotoscope something to an extent. It's got its strengths and weaknesses, obviously, and it's things that it can't really do very well yet. But with that, somebody, you know, a single person can rotoscope like a 2-minute thing, which in the past would take months. Rotoscoping maybe makes animation a little easier, but it still takes a long time to hours. If that even, if you can, you know, sketch over it quickly enough. I can't. I'm bad at that. That's why I want this one to help me.
Kind of going over that is, it's like the way like face rig technology has been increasing crazily, where it's like you look at like say HoloLive, where like they have like simple motions and like, you know, like their mouth like flaps or whatever, and then like they can set like what facial expression. But like now, like I've seen a couple of like newer EN VTubers that like their rig can actually like follow their mouth, so if they like go like this, it'll do that on the VTuber avatar.
I need to see that.
Freaking incredible.
Technology's wild.
And it's like, that's just with like a basic camera. Like,
that's a camera?
Yeah.
It's not a rig?
No.
Dang. Okay.
Like, I guess the program like calculates it. I don't know exactly how it works. That's something I'm going to have to learn in the future. But
that actually reminds me of the Henson Company actually did this. Is they do digital puppetry. So someone is, in some cases it's like literally just going like, you know, working a puppet, but it's like they are live acting puppeteering CG puppet character models, which I guess is very actually similar to what the whole VTuber thing is, and they've been doing that for I guess, decades at this point. Some of the later Henson stuff, once the Muppets kind of have left and Jim has sadly passed, is I don't know it as well, but I know bits and pieces. But like, I know, like, I mean, obviously at the time we could do live shows still, but like they had a touring show of some of their television products that they could do live because the people playing the characters are there, but what the viewer is seeing is a screen, a CG screen of the characters moving around, but acting in real time. And that's freaking, like, animation's crazy, and it's a billion different things. And just because we go, oh, Hollywood's pumping out this, maybe we're not looking at all the same places. Maybe we should be looking in more places. And that's the kind of end thing of this. Maybe that's the lesson.
So, speaking of different styles of animation, I know we're probably running low on time, so I would be remiss if there wasn't something we brought up before the end, and that is a studio that the three of us have loved what they have put out. That is Laika.
I knew it. I had the same thought of just like the combo breaker stop motion thing right at the end.
Laika makes freaking beautiful films.
This is not a thing to be bringing up at the end, but I'm going to do it. Is Laika's visual fidelity too good for stop motion? Is it worth it at this point? Because I love Laika to death. I've seen all the films. I did a panel on them. I love it. I loved their history. It was interesting. Coraline looks like a stop motion film. Paranorman mostly looks like a stop motion film. But we're kind of edging into just, if you don't know any better, it's just CG. Box Trolls Onward, you have to, like, show people, and I have to do that to myself. You have to look at freaking behind the scenes of people doing the stop motion bits, because it is so well made that it loses that, like, charm of stop motioniness, whatever that may be.
I just, like...
And that one doesn't feel like corporate ironing out of, like, the rough patches that make things have kind of a charm and character to them. I think that's literally just they have gained too much power.
Like, Kubo.
Kubo's great.
Kubo and the Two Strings, which, if you haven't seen it, see it. It's so good.
Watch all the Laika movies, except maybe Box Trolls.
But Kubo was a film that the style of it, the visuals of it, lent into everything, plus the story had me, like, in tears. And I know the last time I watched it, I definitely cried. And in the credits, you see them kind of constructing one of the big creatures that they battle in the film. They have that behind-the-scenes thing during the credits.
The giant eyeball monster.
Yeah, and
whose
then
eyeball is a bowling ball.
They show it moving and how they make it work, and it's like incredible to see because you're not thinking about that stuff in the movie because it is gotten to that point where you have that kind of seamlessness.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't that break the record for largest stop motion model?
I think it had to have, because who else is making stop motion on that scale? It's this kind of a budget.
And I guess that's part of the thing too, where you wonder. I mean, is that maybe part of your point here? Is that because they are getting so good, but stop motion, it costs money.
Part of its charm is that it's a little rough around the edges, and not everything needs to be like a Gumby or like a robot chicken. It doesn't need to be that like jangly or like a Rankin Bass special, but there's like something about that sweet spot. And again, this was a theme. I feel like this is a theme that will come up and haunt us forever and ever. Is nostalgia infecting my brain like a deadly virus, making me actually think rationally? Well, yes, but maybe not in this case. Who knows? That's what the question is. But it's like my sweet spot is like Coraline, Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, how
did Frankenweenie look? Because I haven't seen that yet.
We needed to watch it. Like Frankenweenie's kind of middle. I have to see it again because it's been a while. But there's still there's people producing stop motion television that looks interesting. I remember Netflix had, I think it was only for one season, called Buddy Thunderstruck that actually looked pretty neat. That was all like a stop motion television show, and I feel like there's another one that's blanking on right now.
Is Wallace and Gromit still going?
I think Wallace and Gromit is no longer stop motion, but I could be wrong. Like that one's I need to learn that history more because I remember they were stop motion. They team up with DreamWorks. They go to make Flushed Away back in the early 2000s. Their studio burns down during production, and the movie becomes CG because of it. And I don't remember if they ever go back. So this is not the topic to be bringing up when we have like a minute left, but I'm going to try to get this little bit of history in quick. Is that, can you just do CG that looks like stop motion? Because the Lego movie looks like stop motion that is CG. Even, like, again, it is generated in a computer, but it is given all the imperfections and the frame ratey stuff of stop motion, so it has that feel to it. Where Leica's stuff is the opposite. Leica is all stop motion for the most part, but it is so clean, it looks like it looks like computer generated.
I was just saying, is it bad that I've always thought like a movie was actually stop motion?
Lego movie? I don't blame you. I thought it was when I initially saw it, and then it was like, wait, this isn't.
Well, I guess then this is the thing too. That's that debate is internally, are we mourning the loss of the charm of the little bit of stop motion versus the celebration that stop motion has come that far? And that's that kind of like internal like you want to celebrate the accomplishment, but you have that, is it just the nostalgia, or is it that it really does lack the charm? And that's a difficult thing to figure out.
I'm gonna put a pin in that. Come join us next time. This is an episode I've been dying to do, but just the concept, not even just in animation and all that, but in general of are movies and TV becoming so overproduced that all the little quirks and odds and ends and things that were a little rough are being ironed out, and that's where some of the magic of those old things live. But we're going to talk about that next time because we're out of time this time. So thank you for joining us. I've been Kermit the Grog. This is Forward Progress. Shout some things out.
Yes, I'm Forward Progress. You know us from Keeping Friendship Magic. You can find me on Twitter at KeepFriendMagic. If you like what we do here, this is now part of the official Ramble Rousers stream.
Stealing my thunder. I was finally going to be like, I'm going to pimp the thing. That's mine. This is going to be great. But
I'll let you pimp the rest of it.
Okay. You can find this, if you haven't already, and more things like this, including my new series, Grog Zone, where I talk to friends of mine and interview them and say nice things, and we kind of explore how people's brains work. At my new podcast feed, Ramble Rousers. It's like Rabble Rousers, but like you're talking and walking around, because we kind of wander into different topics. It's creative, I guess. But you can find more pop culture talk zones there, and also episodes of Grog Zone, and whatever else we get up to. And as always, check out our parent stream, as Ford was talking about, of Keeping Friendship Magic.
Yep. And if you want to help donate to all of this wonderful content to help us keep going, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/KFM.
Hell yeah. Hit up this bad boy on Patreon.
Yeah. And also, once again, the beautiful and talented Nova Rose.
Also joining me.
Yes, I'm Nova Rose. You can find me on Twitter at Nova Roselia. I post pictures of ponies mostly. Hopefully I'll be branching out a little bit more. I have some projects in the works, so I'm excited.
Things to be excited about. And you can't find me anywhere but the podcast feed. But maybe that'll change as I dig more and more into trying to become a social influencer. See you next time, everybody! Pop Culture Town, outie!
A huge thank you to our patrons, SamuDash, Frenchie McHugh, Riftwing Designs, Statman Dan, and Jason Kuzmak. Without your support, this project wouldn't be possible.